All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Until then, adios.
Conversations from the Darkside.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final Conversations from the Darkside for the 2024 Halloween season. I'm your good buddy, your good pal, and mysterious stranger, Amigo Aaron. Tonight, joined by a man who drives cautiously and quietly through dark streets in an unmarked van. I give you the creeper, Flack Ohara.
I don't know if you drive a van with no windows if you want the nickname the creeper. I don't know.
Let me tell you something. If you drive a van with no windows slowly through neighborhoods, you're a creeper, pal.
You've already been given that name.
There's no way around it. You know, time sure flies when you're having fun, Flack. And I can't believe that we've busted through 3 episodes of Conversations from the Darkside this season. It went really fast this year for me. And I'm glad everyone tuned in for the final edition tonight. I think we've got some good stuff on tap tonight. I've very cunningly titled this one "Halloween Horrors," given our proximity to Halloween, the fact that there's some horrors involved, and hopefully we can give you some nightmare fuel to get you going for the next week, leading up to Halloween. You know, this is the Halloween season. Flack, I saw that you put your giant and skeleton together. What are you and your clan doing out there to celebrate the season this year?
You know, the skeleton, that's a big part of it when you have a 12-foot skeleton. You know, some people like you might put up some, little, like a pumpkin or a jack-o'-lantern or something, but that's what everybody does. Do you know what I mean? But when you put up a 12-foot skeleton, it lets people know you're all in, you know? Yeah. You're not like you're not just a fair weather spirit Halloween person. By the way, have you been to Spirit Halloween this year? Or
I did not. We usually go every year, and I hate to say it, but this year we just have not gotten into the Halloween frame of mind. The family here. I was mentioning earlier. It's been sort of. It's my son's first year of high school, and so it's been crunch time, trying to catch up some homework every night. And Teresa's been out doing ghost stuff during the weekends, but me and Luke haven't really gotten a chance to dig into it too much. So we haven't gotten anything over at Spirit this year. But there are Spirit stores around here. Have you went to check out their wares this year?
We did. You know, they've got, it seems like new animatronics. They have new animatronics every year. But they all kind of seem like they do the same stuff as the ones last year. They just look a little different. I'm always surprised by costumes from our childhood that are making a comeback, but for no particular reason. Like, I saw a big section of Garfield costumes, and I was like, are kids in a Garfield again? You know, there was also Gizmo from the Gremlins, and I thought, my kids don't know who that is, I don't think. So I just thought that was kind of weird.
I wonder if they just don't, the people that own Spirit don't just get some really screaming good deals on these licenses. And they're like, listen, we're bringing back Garfield. Where's Marmaduke, by the way? Or a number of these old pets. Because, and also, what kid is begging their mom, badgering, Mom, I've got to be Garfield this year? Right. That's the one all the kids are wearing. The last time, it hurts my heart to say this, but the boy doesn't trick or treat anymore. He's 15 years old.
Done? Is he done?
He's out.
Yeah.
And the last couple years of trick or treat, he wore the same costume at least maybe 3 years in a row, which is one of those inflatable dinosaur costumes.
Oh, yeah.
They're cool.
Yeah.
Man, I'd love to have had one of those when I was a kid.
Sure.
But this year as usual, I'm the only one that has a costume here. I get a costume for the show every year, and so I've got in fact, I'm looking up here at it for the Amigo show. But so we've been kind of bummer on here on the Halloween spirit, but that's one of the things I like about doing this show, because when I feel like my Halloween spirit's on the wane, that's when I crank up a little dark side action. And I know you have picked out some very interesting tales to talk about tonight. Why don't you lay down some of the spooky on us, Flack? What do you got first up out of the gate?
Listen, I have been saving this story for you. I wanted to tell you this story around the time when I first heard it, but I've been saving it for tonight because it's such a good one. And this is the story of Old Lynn Creek. Now, I heard about this story from a local, although it wasn't local to me. Earlier this year, remember, we had the big eclipse.
Oh, yes.
And my wife and I drove. There was
to that crazy town.
Yes, well,
Yes.
it was not too far, like a few hour drive from us, and that was the whole totality kind of thing, And so I was talking to a lady who was there. She had just had they had some tables and things for sale and stuff, and she seemed kind of interested, and she asked me if we were going to go out to Old Lynn Creek, and I said no, I never heard about this. So this is it's a lake. It's a lake that is at the base of the Ozark Mountains. Okay, now almost 100 years ago. This was like the 1930s, let's say. It was before it was a lake. It was just this basin, at the bottom of the mountains, and there was a town there. They had, everything that would be in a town. There's houses, all the things. And then right in the middle of town, there were these 3 churches, and there was kind of 2 smaller ones, and then one really big church in the middle of this, right? And so, what happened was in the 1930s, the flow of the water changed, and the basin began to fill in. It began to become a lake, and so this lake was going to flood the town, and that's what happened. So it filled in. It is now the town where the town was is 40 feet underwater. Okay. Now here's where things get a little spooky. The water levels of that lake fluctuate because it's connected, to the inflow, the outflow. So the lake moves up and down, right? And because of that, when the water falls, people have reported seeing the steeple of the tallest church. People who've been out boating, people who have been fishing from the shore, people have said when they're out there, they have seen the steeple of the church. Some people, and this is people who don't even know about the history of what happened, have reported hearing the church steeple bell ringing. They say, oh, that's the water's gone down low enough, and the steeple is above water, and the bell is still there and it still rings. But and here's where things get real interesting. When they went through the Historical Society in the 1930s, they had photography. And it turns out before the lake flooded that area, the town was torn down. So the town is not there. And there are literally pictures where they burned down the church. They tore down the buildings and they burned the church. And outside the church is a cemetery. The cemetery just stayed there. So underneath this lake is a cemetery, which is covered in water, but there is no church. So all these people that report, seeing the steeple of the church, that church is not there. It's physically not there. And the people that hear the ringing of the bell of this church, it is literally not there. Again, a lot of people who report hearing this or have reported seeing this don't know the history. They don't know that there was a town there, and until they found these photos, like in the Historical Society, they didn't know that the town had actually been burned down. So we did not go to Old Lynn Creek, but the next time we go that way, like on a road trip or something, we are definitely planning on making a stop and going out there and sitting for a little while and just seeing what we see.
You know, life is funny, and it's funny that because I had no idea you were telling this tale here, and it strikes me as funny because me and Boat played an Elvira game a month or so ago, less than a month, on Amigos. And we got to talking about Elvira. I'm a big fan of Elvira. She's been around forever. I love her. And so our good buddy, Graham W. Vebke, turned me on. She says, listen, you gotta check out her audio book. She did an audio book. And so
okay.
I finally sat down today, and I had a long drive. So I listened to about 3.5 hours of the book. And so in the book, she lived in a town in Kansas that was in a valley, and they had a lot of flooding one year. And keep in mind, she was born in like the 50s, and so what they had to do was they had to flood the town, and so everyone in the town had to leave the town. And she had mentioned in the book that I believe her and her mother had went past the lake where the town used to be, and if the water was low enough, you could see the steeple of the church sticking out of the water. And then you told me this tale. I heard this today. So you think of the amount of weird things that had to happen for these stories to line up. But there you go. By the way, just an FYI, I'm about halfway through this Elvira book, which she reads, by the way. It is out. I haven't got to the part where she becomes Elvira yet. And it is outstanding. It's a must listen. And with her reading it, double trouble. But it is funny that very story would come up.
That's weird.
That is weird, man. My dad told him. West Virginia has a lot of little towns in it that were, and there are some towns here that had the same treatment done, with the flooding. And you mentioned that they said they'd burned the town to the ground. My dad swears to me that not too far from our house on the river, out in the mountains, is a town that they flooded, and they left it completely intact. That's what he tells me. So I wonder if it was commonplace to burn that stuff to the ground like that. It's odd to me that they'd take the trouble to burn down like the church, but they would they would just leave the cemetery there.
I know.
That doesn't seem right, does it?
Yeah. What it reminded me of, and I don't know if we've talked about this on the show, but I read a theory about basically memory imprinting. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. But I don't know what you think about that, but it just, that's what it seems like to me, of these things, like, especially with this cemetery being there and so many people, whatever, that are still there that would remember where that church is. It's almost like the memory of that church is still in that place for some reason, even though the church is gone.
Especially, when you told me that it was under 40 foot of water, that's a high steeple. If it's that's pretty.
Yeah.
So
I think when the water comes down, so like all the time people don't see it, but when the water drops, that's when they had reported seeing it.
That's what an odd and unusual tale. Someone mentioned, I think it was Uber scuba diver, said he'd like to go scuba diving there, and after you mentioned the graveyard party, he's like, maybe not. That's maybe not the worst idea.
I got to go. We went on a vacation. We got to go snorkeling one time, and I thought the exact same thing when I heard this. I was like, man, to be able to see a town, to be able to go down there and just, because it would almost be like you'd be flying, like you could float through a window or go. That seems like it'd be. Yeah, again, not the cemetery part. I could pass on that, but maybe there'd be a concession stand down there or something. That's the part I want.
Just speaking of cemeteries for a minute, I heard a show the other day, and this guy was talking about how much he enjoyed hanging out in cemeteries, not because he was a ghost hunter or anything, but because, I don't know, it centered him or put his life in perspective or something like that. You know, the
Mhm.
Chud, my buddy the Chud, he used to, he'd go out back when he took care of himself, he would go out to the cemetery and that's where he would do laps out there and walk,
Oh.
yeah, he would walk the cemetery to get exercise. And I always thought to myself,
Mhm.
I mean, anytime I'm in the cemetery, it's either I'm at a funeral or I'm doing some kind of spooky, goofy, ghosty baloney, you know. And so, are you the kind of person that hangs out in a cemetery? And also along those lines, when you hear that they've sank all these cemetery plots with all these bodies in, I mean, did you think that? How does that strike you?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, it's hard to think of people putting things on top of cemeteries without thinking of things like Poltergeist,
Yeah,
where,
that's the
where
very
you
first
got
thing that comes into my head. That movie.
yeah, you got a haunted thing because you've got these bodies underneath it. I mean, here's the thing: is that like I cemeteries. I think in general, like especially the U.S. is kind of a relatively new. I mean, past few hundred years, right? Relatively new thing. Like I read a thing one time that said from a Native American. They said, cemeteries were like when someone died, you dug a hole, and that's where they were. So the whole country was a cemetery, at one point in time. So there's no telling what's underneath the ground anywhere that you happen to be. As far as like hanging out in cemeteries, it's kind of weird because you do get that like calm like I feel like a cemetery is like a no nonsense kind of place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna see people skateboarding. You know what I mean? You're not gonna have
You probably
cars
should.
with loud stereo. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would hope not. So it is that kind of place where you can just kind of go and reflect. Now, I don't have like any of my family. They're not buried nearby here, So I've never gone to like. I don't go to the cemetery like for people that I know. Although I have one coworker who passed away, and I go there. I go to his gravesite every year, and I have found myself. At first, I was like, "Well, what am I doing?" Like I felt like this is what you're supposed to do, right? Like you're supposed to go there. But over the past few years, you just kind of go there and more than just talking to that person or that it is just kind of a place where you can kind of sit there and just kind of maybe cleanse a little bit. I don't know if that's the right word, but just reset and just kind of think about things. Now, I used to have a friend when I was younger that would do rubbings of gravestones. I think that was before we had cell phone cameras. I think that now people just take pictures.
I own a couple. Believe it or not, I've done that. If you could believe it.
Have you?
Yeah, I used to go out with this girl named Nancy, and when I just got out of high school, and I was we were hanging out a lot, and she was really into that, and so we would get a certain type of paper and some charcoal. And it's funny. It's funny you should mention this because I hadn't thought about this memory for so long. Not to interject into your story, but just that it hit me like a ton of bricks. Nancy lives out in a place called Hurricane Creek, and she lives out in the sticks of it. If you follow, the road goes right along this old creek. That's where Hurricane gets its name, the town I live in, and. She was showing me one time. She goes, "Listen, we're gonna get rubbings of these headstones over here." And when I looked at where they were at, I guess the creek had shifted at some point in the last 18 kabillion years, and so the creek had went directly through a very small cemetery, and several of the graves were almost, for all intents and purposes, in the creek. And so we went out and got it took rubbings of these things, and I had one of these things on my wall for years and years and years. And then one day I needed a frame, and I thought, man, it's kind of creepy to have this unknown guy's grave on my wall for the last 15, 20 years. And so I finally, I wish I hadn't done this, but I took the rubbing out, tossed it. I mean, I may have stuffed it in something. So for God only knows if you've seen this menagerie. but I needed the frame or something. But yeah, these graves were stuck right in the middle of a creek, a moving creek. Probably not long for this world, and then well, like it matters. But it's funny. That's the only time I think I ever did it. But she was a real proponent.
Yeah.
She had a big portfolio of. And I always asked her, like, what makes you do these? Which ones do you pick? And she didn't say they were telling her to do it. She just did draw on the one, and she would do it. So.
Yeah. My town is roughly 100 years old, and it was mostly founded by Czechoslovakians. So a lot of the streets have Czech names, and a lot of the businesses had Czech names. And it's interesting when you go to the cemetery and you'll see a person's name, and there'll be like somebody Crowdhill, and I had a friend who lived on Crowdhill Street, and you go, oh, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It kind of adds this personal connection to the place where you are. So I always kind of like that aspect of it.
I don't think I've ever asked you about this. I don't know if we've ever discussed it either. Have you ever been involved with much ghost hunting or milling around spooky type stuff in the cemetery? Or I mean, have you or your wife or both of you, is that in your all's wheelhouse?
Not really too much. I know that when we were there's a very, very famous haunted cemetery in the Chicago area called Bachelor's Grove, and my grandma's house is about 10 miles from Bachelor's Grove. And so we went there one time, and it was around dusk, I would say, and we didn't see anything strange or anything like that. But the problem is, in areas like that, it's one thing that my dad used to always say about like hanging out in cemeteries and stuff. He would say, I'm always a lot more afraid of the living than the dead. So
yeah.
Places like that, you especially if it's a well-known kind of place. So I never have done it. There are parts of it that I think are super interesting and that I would be interested in doing, and then there's some parts of it like in some of these shows, like the one thing that I really don't get, like I've seen iPhone apps that supposedly will say like random phrases based off of a thing, and I think,
yeah,
I mean, as a programmer, I go, I don't know how well something like that would work.
Well, yeah, it's Tree has a bunch of those. I'm not bragging when I say this, but it's just a fact. I've stomped around in many graveyards over the years. When I was into I was drawn to like the supernatural when I was younger, and I'm like you. I grew up. It was Nimoy stuff, and then it was the books and Time Life stuff, and then go to the library, check stuff. And I was always into it. And then when I got old enough to have a car and drive around, I was into it. But when I moved to Kentucky, I really sort of went through a phase where I was just crazy about it. My buddy Larry and me used to go and stomp around in graveyards and all sorts of spooky places that were supposed to be haunted, and it was a thrill, And then when I met Teresa, she was big time into it, and so she got me going into the prisons, the houses, the big estates, the museums. We've investigated a whole bunch of different places over the years, but graveyards, to me, they were sort of a spooky thing to do when you had nowhere else to go and you just wanted to do something that was kind of exhilarating. But Teresa actually has she's been featured in a couple different things. She's sort of like a semi-pro expert on various headstones and what they mean. They mean stuff, which I had no idea what they meant. And some of the inscriptions mean stuff. And so, depending on the age of the cemetery you're at, I guess the older stuff means, I guess modern stuff, not so much. I mean, when you can get buried in a Pac-Man machine or something that looks like a NASCAR or whatever, you've kind of like, we've left the building on this stuff now. But, there was a time where it meant more. I'm not sure if death meant less than it does now. Just to me, it seems that way.
I think a lot of them mean don't dig here.
Yeah.
So I saw in the chat someone mentioned find a grave, which I'd like to talk about. And
Yeah.
before we talk about that, I see we've had someone else enter our spiritual realm here. It looks like the Mr. John Boatofcar Shawler has entered the
Oh.
house. So I'd like to
Hello.
toss a question to Mr. Boatofcar. Are you
How about
familiar with Find a Grave, and have you ever used that to go find someone's grave to go look at?
First of all, can you? I want to make sure you can hear me.
yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I've never used Find a Grave. Is it findagrave.com? Because that's a killer URL.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could go there and type in anybody that's registered, like a famous person or somebody, and it will tell you, and it will give you the GPS coordinates of a grave site at a cemetery. So you can literally go to a cemetery. I will tell you that my wife and I, my wife loves doing this. Like, we will go, we'd be on a road trip and she'll go, oh my gosh, we got to go. Like, recently we were in Las Vegas, and actually we stopped at Kevin Mitnick's grave, and we went to go see his grave, and Susan pulled up Find a Grave to see if anybody else was there, and she said, oh, get ready for this. And so we walked across the cemetery. We're walking, and all of a sudden I see a small little plot, and on top of it was a liquor bottle and something else, and then we get there and it was Red Fox. So,
Oh my gosh. Hey, man.
Elizabeth finally took him home right there.
Man, it's amazing to me that Kevin Mitnick has passed. He was that blows my. I know when he died, it was unbelievable, and it's unbelievable to me. But we were talking about cemeteries.
Well, I
go
was going to
ahead.
answer Flack's question if
I
it's okay
apologize.
with you.
Get into it.
I've never. This probably speaks volumes to the quality of my character. I've never once wondered where any of my relatives are buried, like my great grandfather or anything like that. All of my immediate family, is buried in St. Patrick's Catholic Cemetery over across the tracks in Scott Depot.
Oh.
And so whenever I want to see most of my family, they're over there that have died, recently. But there is an old Shawler family cemetery, and it's on the grounds of Camp Crescendo, which got turned into a band camp. The Shawler family farm was sold and was turned into a band camp, but the original Shawler family cemetery is still on the grounds.
Very neat.
So,
I'm like you. I don't go see my family, but when we went on vacation to Los Angeles, we used to Find a Grave and looked up where all the Three Stooges were buried. So that's
Yeah.
where my priorities are.
I have been to see two famous people's graves before in my life that I can think of. When I lived in England, I went to go see the grave of Nick Drake, who is a sort of famous singer-songwriter from the 60s. And he's buried in just like a regular old grave in like a regular old village in England. I was expecting it to look like Jim Morrison's grave, with like the graffiti and all that stuff.
Is this somebody that you're a fan of? Like you?
Yeah.
You like
I was
their
a huge
music
Nick.
and stuff?
Yeah, I was a huge Nick Drake guy. I still am. I love Nick Drake. And my buddy that I worked at Apple with, he was a Nick Drake fan too. And there was a Nick Drake tribute concert that was going on, and so we drove out to that. And I can't remember if the tribute concert was in his village where he grew up. I want to say it was, because otherwise, why would we be there? So
Sure.
my thinking is that we're like, yeah, and then after the concert, we'll go out and we'll go see his grave. And so we went to the tribute concert, and then we went to his grave. And yeah, I mean, it was very, very humble, just in a churchyard, just there with the rest of them. And then the other one that I went to go see, this is just last year when I was back in the UK in November, was almost a year ago exactly from now, went to see the gravesite of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh.
Who's buried
Very good.
in Oxford. And so I went over there, and again, I was expecting life-size statue of Frodo Baggins, to mark the grave. And it wasn't. He's buried right next to two people that you have no idea who they are, and he does have a plot. Him and his wife share a plot. And in this particular cemetery, there's like every plot is like the headstone, and then where I assume the caskets are, there's like a little garden plot, and so other people have flowers and things like that. And of course, it being Tolkien, people had left little notes and remembrances and things like that. So there were drawings of hobbits and things like that. So it was definitely more than Nick Drake, but it still was less than I was expecting in my mind.
We went recently. We were down in southeast Oklahoma in Hugo, and Hugo is home to it's called the Mount Olivier cemetery. But so it's a very, very, very unique location because for whatever reason, back when the circuses would travel. When they were done traveling, so all the Barnum and Bailey and all these things, all the circus performers in the off season would all go for some reason to this town in Hugo, Oklahoma, and then when they passed away, that's where they were buried. So they have it's like the circus. I think they call it the circus cemetery. It literally is what they call it. And so you could walk around there and it'll just say like because I was taking it because it said like so it had the name and then it said tightrope walker, and I was like, oh, did he fall, like, oh, did that, but then we were like, oh no, it's all, as we were looking more and more, but there are, and it has a lot of them have like pictures, engravings on the tombstones. Like there's elephant trainers and performers and ring masters and just all these people. And really what it made me want to do is retire in Hugo, Oklahoma. I thought, what a great town that would have been, to just walk into the store and, see the bearded lady or just people hanging out in town. I thought that sounded like a lot of fun.
But before we go to break, since you popped in here, Bode, we were talking about the unusual hobby or pastime or whatever of just hanging out or walking or contemplating things in a cemetery. Is this something that you have ever practiced? Do you ever just go out and take a walk in a cemetery or?
Oh yeah, I love cemeteries. I've been up to Spring Hill Cemetery. You know where that is, up in Charleston?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
And I went up there with Ebe, and I was like, we're gonna have a nice little stroll around this cemetery. It's got the steepest hills of any place you can possibly imagine. The whole thing is on the side of a mountain.
Yeah.
And so we've been up there. The cemetery that is close to where I live, when you're coming down Main Street there on the right. Sometimes I'll go over there and walk around. One of my buddies from high school is buried there. But the thing that I remember most is in Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts over at the First Baptist behind the church, there's a graveyard. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
Okay. And after Boy Scouts, we used to go back there and play hide and seek among the gravestones.
Yeah.
Really?
And, which I'm pretty sure is sacrilegious on a number of levels. But of course, when you're boys, you're like, man, playing hide and seek in a graveyard is about the coolest thing you can possibly imagine.
Yeah. It's funny when you get older, like I'm not a big fan of the cemeteries these days. It seems like every time I go there, it's not a good thing. It's never a good thing, actually. And
the older we get, the harder we try to stay out of them.
That's right. It's
right.
The last thing I need to be reminded of is my ultimate mortality, my fear of dying. So, and on that happy note, everybody, we're going to take our first break. We'll be back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Some more scary stuff. Conversations from the dark side. Hang with us.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
And we are back with more Conversations from the Dark Side. It's myself, Amigo Aaron, everyone's favorite superstar podcaster, Rob Flack Ohara, and the King Dong of the Amigos. It's John Boatofcar Shawler.
Beyond the grave.
There it is. I hope not. Jesus, who's going to do all the back end for me? So, I've had enough cemetery talk for a while now. I'm getting scared. Don't want to go down that road anymore. So, Flack, give us another one of the fateful, frightful tales from your bag of frights.
You know, this is a story that made the rounds a couple of years ago, and it's just kind of uh, got some notoriety again over the past year or two. Netflix made a documentary, or not a documentary, but a mini series based on this story. But this is the story of the Watcher. Now, the Watcher. This is a lot of ghost stories. This isn't a ghost story necessarily, but like true crime and horror stories. It's always these old stories, like this happened in the 70s. And I think a lot of it is because it seems like things like this should be easy to solve, like in modern day stuff, right? But this is still a bit of a mystery. So let me set this story up for you. This started in 2014. This husband and wife named Derek and Maria Broaddus, they purchased a house, and this address is very famous now. It's 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. Now, this is it looks like a big, giant mansion. It's also in a historical part of town. So, it's one of those areas where you have to go get it approved if you're what kind of work you're going to do on your house, if you're going to change the shingles, all that kind of stuff. But they wanted to fix the house up before they moved into it. And so Derek was working full time. And so Maria was going to the house and doing work. And one day she received a letter in the mail. And this letter was extremely creepy. I mean, I think that's really the best term for it. It said that the person who wrote the letter is the third generation of his family who has been watching over the house. That they've been watching this house, and it refers to the house like 657 Boulevard almost as a name. It says, I've been watching 657 Boulevard. There were things in the letter saying, asking them why they haven't moved in yet, and asking them if they were aware of what was hiding in the walls and things like that. So, nothing. Yeah, nothing, directly threatening, but a lot of creepy kind of stuff, and enough to let the people know that they were watching the house. Like physically, whoever wrote this could see them, right? Could see other people, coming and going, and kind of described them. And one of the things is it referred to their children as young bloods, which was a little bit disturbing to Maria. The Broaddus family, they contacted the previous owner of the house and said, did you ever get any letters like this? And they said, oh yeah, we got at least one, but we just threw them away. We just thought it was a prank, and we read it and it seemed creepy, and we tossed it away and nothing happened. So they weren't really too happy that they'd bought this house and known that somebody had been writing letters to the owner of this house for quite some time. So this is an excerpt from, I believe this is the first letter. It says, it has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all the secrets it holds yet? Will the young bloods play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It's far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. These are the kind of letters. And these letters are all signed a Watcher. Okay. So, unsurprisingly, they didn't move into the house.
Yeah.
they keep working on the house, right? So after 2 years of owning it, they went to like a city council kind of meeting, and they said, we want to tear the house down. The city council vetoed it. They said, no, this is a historic site. You can't tear the house down.
Did they show them the note?
Yes, and they mentioned the note. So yeah, their request to tear the house down was vetoed. And so they ended up just renting the house out to someone else. But then the renters started getting letters. And this is from a letter that the renters got, it said maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars and bicycles crash. Bones break. So, so when they started referring to the children as young bloods and mentioning the children by name in the letters, not only did they go to the city council, they went to the local police and they said, this is creepy, right? And as the letters escalated and perceived threats by the Watcher increased, the FBI eventually got involved. Now, part of the problem with this story isn't that there were no suspects, it's that there are so many suspects that everybody, it's like playing Clue. Everybody is kind of a suspect, right? There's a next door neighbor who had lived there since the 60s and had complained about things about the house, and so they said, "Oh, this has got to be the guy, right?" It was this old man. It's got to be the guy. Then they found a younger person, I don't know, maybe a young adult, who lived nearby, who's online. He was an online gamer, and his online gamer alias, his handle was the Watcher. So they were like, "Oh, this is definitely him," right? Then there was even a thing where the neighbor's sister was a real estate agent, and they thought maybe that he had written it for her, right? So there are all these different angles. And the FBI took the letter and they said they were able to get DNA off of the letter, and the DNA was female, which ruled out all these people. They also did, all the letters were written by hand, and so they're all handwritten, and so they took handwriting analysis from all these people, and none of it matched. So all these people have been ruled out as potential subjects, and even at one point, Maria, well, actually not Maria, but her husband Derek was accused of writing the letters, because it turned out that years earlier he had problems with a neighbor and had written anonymous letters and sent them. So it's like there's so many potential suspects in this case. And so Maria and Derek teamed up together, and they hired a former FBI agent, and said, "We want you to not only clear our name, but find out who it is." Nobody has ever solved this case. The police, the FBI, this FBI agent, and a private investigator that has been hired, nobody has ever figured out who was writing the letters. Now, Maria and Derek sold the house. One of the things, almost, maybe you could take this as a Amityville horror angle, that there were some accusations that maybe they couldn't afford the house, so they were writing the letters to try to get out of a deal, but that was never proven. But they ended up selling the house, and the new owners, I believe, said that they got a letter, but that was it. So it's kind of stopped. You know, once you hear that the FBI is doing DNA profiling and they're in your neighborhood, that's probably a good time to stop. You know, so I think it's tailored off since then. Now, Netflix did do a season of a show based on The Watcher. I think it's called The Watcher, I think. And they've changed some of the details, you know, I mean, not just the names, but they changed, like the family only has 2 kids instead of 3. And the thing is, they kind of combine some suspects and stuff. So it's if you're into this kind of thing and you want to be a little bit creeped out at night, go read the real stuff about this case, because I think that's better than the Netflix one. But there's a lot going on, and I gotta say, and this is what I would toss to you guys. I mean, is there anything creepier than like getting a note, like an anonymous note from someone that you realize has been watching you? I mean, it's a very invasive kind of feeling.
It's amazing that they got it this place. It's a lot like the Amityville house. Like, how does this thing stay on the market? Like, who's who's buying this stuff? This would, I mean, if you've got kids, and you get a note like this, I mean,
Or young bloods, you could call them young bloods.
well, you could call them that if you're a creepo. But if like as someone who's got a bunch of kids, like well, not has a kid, I feel like I got a bunch of kids. I mean, don't tell anybody. Maybe I shouldn't release this now. But someone who's got a kid, like I would just not move in there. I mean, that would be enough for me to go. The fact that they just kept the ball, especially if the neighbor, if the person you bought it from was like, oh yeah, we got some of those, I'd be like, no,
Right.
And wouldn't
No.
Well, and that was the
I'm
problem is that they didn't get the letters until they had bought the house, and then they didn't move in there. So now they own this gigantic house that they were too afraid to move into.
Didn't we cover a story a couple years ago where these people found a guy living in the house, like in a hidden room? And this happens. I've seen many tales of people that have like slid into little spots in the attic or whatever. I mean, you don't know, there could be someone physically living there, you know, that's how they got all your information, and they could at any point sneak down and just cut throats, or they could be living in the backyard or God knows where. I'd be out personally. What about you, Boater?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not fully convinced there isn't somebody living in my attic. Like I'll just be laying in bed at night and I'll hear like footsteps and stuff up there, like somebody moving around, walking around.
Really?
And like, yeah. And so like, I don't know if it's like, you know, I asked my dad one time and he's just like, it's just the house settling.
Oh yeah, that shtick.
Yeah, that shtick. You know, that's a lie.
Oh, well.
And so, you know, I've gone up there and there's this old stove up there, but it's this kid stove. It's like one of those like wooden stoves that you'd give a kid back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anybody up there. I just saw that
there could be
freaky-looking
human
stove.
remains in it.
Yeah, I didn't look in the stove because that would cause me to actually like step into the attic and not just be on the ladder.
You know,
like I've got a line that I don't cross.
What if it was a stove costume? It was
man,
wow.
a stove
You guys are
costume.
master disguise. You know, Boat. Now, listen, I don't want to cast aspersions on your character, your good name, but you strike me as the kind of person that could be sort of timid in the face of this, like the paranormal. Would that be
here's
accurate?
what I tell myself.
Yeah.
Because whenever I get scared, I say, okay, I've been living in this house since 2013. Okay, if there's a dude up there moving around, you know, he hasn't bothered me. I've not really bothered him. We're just going to continue to coexist peacefully.
See, but he hasn't bothered you yet.
Well, that's true.
You know what I mean?
It could be tonight.
Yeah.
Well, my wife and I we often joke like we'll I joke with her about like getting a pool cabana boy, you know, but as long as he cleans the pool, that's all I care about, you know. And or Susan will say like you can hire a little a cute maid, you know, in a little maid costume, but as long as she does laundry, she doesn't care. Like that's all our thing, right? So I feel like if I were to find someone living in my attic, I would just leave notes like, you know, please feed the cats. We'll be gone this weekend or whatever, you know, just like if you just do your part, you can live in the attic. I'm okay with
Listen,
that.
aren't you the guy that had a secret room in his house that someone could have been living in?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Well, I don't know. It would be pretty small to live in, but it could happen.
Yeah. I'm just
Now,
saying.
Aaron, I want to ask you about the time when people were trying to bust into the mountain. You know, at any of those points, you know, where you heard people outside making strange noises or trying to get in, at no point did you think, hey, I'm just pulling up stakes and I'm moving back with mom and dad.
Well, I mean, it was mom and dad's house, so I mean, technically.
Well, moving back with mom and dad where they currently reside.
It's funny you should mention that because it's funny in the YouTube chats. My old partner in crime, Leroy, who spent many a night up on the mountain, and of course the house on Mud Mountain was at a weird spot. It was in the woods, and the woods and the house were directly beside the interstate. So it was both incredibly quiet and loud all at once. It was very strange. And you would hear stuff all the time up there, and Larry could vouch for that. And Larry, I will say, God bless him. I love Larry, but he's an amazing coward. I mean, he's like Shaggy from Scooby Doo. I mean, I've been ghost hunting with him, and he'll literally sprint to the car and lock the door. Like so. when
Who's a bigger weenie, Larry or the Chud?
Oh, Larry, because Chud is a kind of a creepy guy in a weird way. Larry's an actual. He just when it kind of happens, he's gone. He's gone, and he stayed up there and heard stuff. But you do hear stuff up there. Now, the funny thing about Mud Mountain is it could be ghosts, it could be animals, or it could be people trying to kill you, like for real, because you were in a bad part of town too. That's another thing about it. So. Eventually, once the house got broken into one time while I was at work, and we screwed the air conditioning in so they couldn't push it back through the door. I mean, there was no one that could physically get into that house short of, I don't know, maybe come in through the roof or break a second-story window, get a ladder. But, I mean, it was a thick block house with a door that, I know personally, having been locked out of my house 3 times, I couldn't knock it down, and I'm me. So... It was impenetrable. So once I knew it was impenetrable, I was okay. But up to that point, I was not okay. And I would hear weird stuff knocking around out there. But you never know what it is. I mean, animals, you'd be surprised that the tiniest bird can sound like a corpse shambling through the woods. Because it doesn't take that much to make noise, And especially when you've got coyotes and stuff that are running around, you just never know what you're going to hear up there. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say I wasn't very scared, because I was scared quite often, actually, up there. But you do get used to it after a while. But I would not get used to having someone creepy live in my house that may kill me because they're sending me creepy letters. That's where I'll draw the line.
I've learned with, we have my workshop, and we converted part of it to the movie room, right? But it's separate from the house. I mean, it's not far. Like, I can see, it's all paved between there and the house. I mean, it is not a far distance, But I have learned not to go out there and watch scary movies late at night. You know what I mean? Because, there's like no way my backyard would be so inconvenient for a killer to get into. Like Bigfoot or a murderer. Like, there's no reason they would ever, like, get into my backyard in the first place. But I will tell you, I have walked out of that, and I do that. I won't run, but I do that stupid fast walk. It's almost like a shuffle where and I kind of look over my shoulder because Freddy Krueger might be.
I do that from the arcade to the house. It's the same thing. Now, let me ask you both, since we're all getting older. Some of us quicker than others, but. I'll ask you first, Bo. Then I want to hear you. Do you think stuff creeps you out more now than it did when you were younger, or vice versa?
No, definitely less now than it did when I was young. When I was fearful of everything as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've related to you about how even the theme for the professional wrestling that came on Saturday mornings scared me as a child.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I was scared of most things. Or even in high school, like the first time when Blair Witch came out and one of my friends came over and she told me about the movie, I didn't sleep that night because I was so scared from her description of the movie.
Yeah.
Oh.
You should have watched it. It would have really blown your mind.
Oh, I know. I did watch it later, and then I was also freaked out.
Yeah.
And so these days, I don't get scared because I'm not, I guess... Listen, I guess I'm just going to be real. I think a lot about my mortality because I'm a teacher, and teachers and kids get shot all the time in schools.
Oh yeah.
So I'm more in tune with the fact that my life may end any day. So things like random guy living upstairs, they don't freak me out as much as they used to.
What about you, Flack?
What's changed for me is what scares me. Of course, when I was younger, everybody knows I'm a huge fan of unsolved mysteries, but I
hate that theme. That theme used to scare me too. I used to be laying in bed and I'd hear that come on, and I would freeze.
It's amazing how many people wrote into the show back when we first talked about that show, and that theme scared the hell out of them. I don't know why. It's just some syntho crap, but man, it scares people to death. Go ahead, Flag.
I'd watch an episode of Bigfoot, and then I'd lay in bed and think I bet Bigfoot's like a Bigfoot would have to walk down Route 66 and then turn into my neighborhood to get to my house. Like, Bigfoot's not coming to where I live. There's no UFOs, but as a kid, that's what scared me. I was scared of aliens. I was scared of Bigfoot. I was scared of chupacabras. I like silly stuff. I'm not scared of that stuff today. We've talked about I think last year. We talked about ghosts. I said if I ever saw a ghost, I would run towards it. I would be like, "What is that?" Like I would have to know what that is. Like I'm not scared of that stuff. What I'm scared of is people. That's what scares me today. Not the supernatural stuff makes me curious and interested and stuff like that. But that's what scares me more now. I'm way more worried about somebody trying to get into my home than Bigfoot.
Have you ever? And I'll ask both. I want to hear both this from you because I think this will maybe change the tune. Have you ever had something that you would consider a genuine paranormal event happen to you? I don't mean
Absolutely.
UFOs per se, but just like you saw.
Absolutely.
What happened to you, Bode?
I was in 8th grade and I was in Miss Hall's class.
Okay. I knew Miss Hall.
And we were writing in our journals. And I bit off the tip of my pen. Right?
Yeah.
And I bit off the tip of my pen and I like spit it out. I was just like, oh. And then I was just thinking about, man, I am screwed because the ink is going to come out of this. It's going to get all over me. Okay. And then I looked back at my pen and my pen was whole.
Oh, weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I swear that happened.
I'll believe you because I've seen your joystick at your house. That you've got chew marks all over it. It looks like you fed it to the dog. So I have no doubt believing that you stuck a pen in your mouth. Oh, I mean that's a low key horrific event. That's a personal event. Okay, that's good. What about you, Rob? I don't know if we ever went down this road. Have you ever had a genuine thing that you can't explain happen?
There was one thing where, and I think we might have talked about this years ago, but I had a friend who told me, I went over to his house and he said this totally nonchalantly. He said, "By the way, our house is haunted and weird stuff happens in here all the time, and so if it does, it's no big deal." And that night, we were playing video games in the living room and no one else was in the house. It was just us in the house. And the cabinet came open in the kitchen and a thing of spaghetti fell out. Like a container of dry spaghetti, fell out and the spaghetti came out. And the thing that gave me thought, I suppose, is not that it happened. It was his reaction to it where he was just like, "Oh, yeah, that stuff happens," And it wasn't like, I always thought if he was trying to trick me, he would have really played it like, "Oh, look at that, a ghost," like that sort of thing. But it wasn't that kind of reaction. He was just like we were playing, I think in television, he was just like, "Oh, yeah, that happens," And it always that always kind of stuck with me, like just a weird thing that happened, and that there was no explanation for, and he said, yeah, just weird stuff like that happens there. No, that always kind of bothered me.
I think, I've mentioned this before, so I'll just briefly recount it, but I think when something like that really strange happens, it's because everyone, you see a werewolf movie, you're walking to your car, a werewolf could get you, but it probably won't because werewolves aren't real, right? But when you when you experience something that happens that happened that you can't explain, it's almost, for me anyway, the time it happened to me, it was almost like I'd pulled a winning lottery ticket. It was a stunned sort of, did that just happen? That's sort of the way I felt. And in my case, again, we were investigating at the Whipple Country Store, which was one of the last remaining mining stores that you could tour in West Virginia. It was an old store that used to take script from miners. And me and Tree's dad, some other guy, were locked in this closet they used for bookkeeping. And we were all just joking around because it was the men. We were there for the women. The men were just screwing around. And we had a light in there, and someone said, "Okay, if there's a ghost in here, make something happen right now." And the second they said that, a book flew off the shelf and the light went out. All right, that was a genuine. I was watching the two guys; they weren't involved. This was a thing that happened, and it was probably the one time in my whole life where I was really started. Holy, what is this? What is this? You know, I don't think I was that scared, but I was. It's to this day, it's a feeling. I don't know if I've ever had it again. It's just like I can't believe that just happened. That kind of thing. You know, I wonder if we had something genuinely frightening happen, linked to the paranormal, how we would actually react. I would wait.
You know, I'll tell you.
In place.
I tell you what I think, because I think about this all the time.
All right.
Most of the time, when I'm having an experience, I think back to an anecdote related to it that I've heard from Rob Flack Ohara.
Yeah.
And one time he said that, you know, somebody told him, I think it was maybe it was your dad or your grandfather. He said, if aliens come or whatever, just walk toward them, just figure out what's going on. And I'd like to think that I'd be brave enough that if I see like a ghost or some kind of weird nonsense going down, instead of running away, I'd be like, what's it like being a ghost chick? Can you explain your presence? And like, you know, I really want to dig in there and see what was going on.
It's easy to say I'll run at him, but I don't think I'd run at him, if I'm honest.
I know. I'd like to think that I would.
And there was a time where when I was out romping and stomping, and when I was younger, going to the cemeteries and stuff, I had a lot more bravado, and maybe that's part of it. One thing
I can't believe there was a time where you'd have more bravado than you have now.
Oh boy, was there? I mean, I had bravado cut out my yin yang, but I mean the one thing is you get older, you have you're bestowed a gift, and it's the gift of realizing your own mortality. And so if I was standing, let's just say I'm standing in a hallway. Like, for example, we went to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. It's got these long hallways. And so if we saw a light flash or something, we'd be like, oh, look at that. But if I saw like a full-body apparition coming down the hall, you know, at me, I can tell you right now, I'd be getting my hiney. I'd break a fat guy world record just for speed as I moved down out of that cell area, because what if that ghost grabbed hold of me and it gave me the business? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
what if I died of fright?
So something that has changed in my personal point of view is that I used to say, if I saw something, especially in today's world of cell phones, right? Like we all have the camera that's in my pocket all the time is a higher definition than the camera I bought 10 years ago that I paid almost $1,000 for, right? Like we all have the highest quality cameras on us at all times. And I used to say, if I saw a ghost or a UFO or something like that, I would try to capture it. You know what I mean? I don't think that I would anymore. And I'll tell you why. Because if you go to YouTube and say, you know, look for videos of UFOs, there are thousands of videos of UFOs that look 100% real.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think there's any point in capturing that, because like, what's the point? You're never going to convince somebody else. Right. So if you're in that moment, you have that unique opportunity to convince yourself.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's what's changed for me. You know, like I said, if like we talked about, like Boat was talking, you know, about the ghost or whatever, like you can take, and that's the other thing is people always go, I saw a ghost and I tried to film it and I just got a bright light. Well, then it's just like going to a concert and you're staring at your phone instead of watching the concert. You know what I mean? So like, why would you stare at your phone when there's a ghost there? Like, I'm going to take in that moment, try to interact with it, whatever it is. And because at the end of the day, I don't need to convince everybody else that UFOs are real or ghosts are real or, you know, any of these things. I want to know for myself. Sure. Right. So I think that's what's changed for me over time. I wouldn't bother trying to film it. I would like to say, like you guys, I'm going to engage with it. In reality, I would just be crying and you know, pooping. It's probably closer, you know.
You know, I kind of queried the chat a little bit earlier if they'd had any experiences, and Petzel has an interesting thing here. He says, I had a near accident in a car where I believe my car passed through the other car crossing through the intersection. So that is something bizarre. If you ponder that, ghost car. I will say it is for me. It's not uncommon to have kind of weird feelings or experiences in my car. You ever had anything weird
Mhm.
happen in your car?
I feel like your mind starts to get into an altered state if is somebody that drives a lot, Aaron. Do you think that it's possible that you're more prone to have sort of visionary experiences, or are you more prone to imagine weird stuff going down if you've been on the road all day?
Well, I think you may be onto something. It's funny, I never had occurred to, if I'm honest, that you would. But I mean, yes, maybe you are triggered in some way. If you think about it, the hypnotic way that the road can capture your attention and kind of lull you, which is what people fall asleep, I think. And so I can definitely see that. But I mean, the thing about going, I mean, it's face facts. You're in a car, you're going at a speed. So when you see something weird on the side of the road, for example, or even sometimes in front of you on the road, it can mess with your head because it's amazing how quickly cars move so quickly that you really can't. I mean, I saw a guy doing crash tests at 5 mile an hour, 10 mile an hour, 20 and 30. And like you wouldn't think that's that fast, but it's plenty fast to sneak up on you. So I think you might have something there. I mean, I'm trying to think of all the times I've been driving out in the sticks. I don't think I've ever seen anything weird on the road, and I've done thousands of miles at work. So what about you, Flack? You drive a ton. Or
Oh
you
man,
used to.
yeah, yeah. Well, still, we still put in the miles, and yeah, I think that's the problem is that it's easy for our minds to wander, and then all of a sudden, you start thinking, like, oh, did I just imagine something or did I see that, and of course that gets dangerous obviously when we're driving like that. I know that I did a extremely long solo road trip one time. I drove basically I drove, I'm trying to remember the math exactly. I think I drove 16 hours, slept for 4, and another 16 hours. I had a really short window of time to get cross country. And I remember, like, by the end, like, there were parts of the trip I didn't remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like where you feel like, you're just going through the motions.
Now that happens to me all the time. Yeah, exactly.
That's how I go through lunch a lot of times. Just I don't know how I ended up at that buffet I just got there, but the I don't know. I will say, to kind of, I wanted to comment kind of on Petzel, one of the people in our chat. He said he felt like he had gone through a car, gone through another car. Like if you've ever been in an accident or something, there was one time that we almost got broadsided by a car. I mean, it was literally there was a car that was stolen, and we were at a stoplight, and it turned green, and the car in front of us went, and then the guy ran the light, so he went in between us and the first car, right? I mean, it was just inches that he missed our car, and was just flying through the intersection, And then you start doing this math where you go, if you think about all the things in your day that got you to that moment, like if you'd taken 5 seconds longer to tie your shoes, or done this or done that, or a little bit longer in the bathroom, or you'd walk slower, or whatever. Like there's so many things that had to line up to get you right at that moment, at that exact second, for that thing to happen. And I have had this weird thought, like on road trips, where I'll start thinking, like, maybe I should have done something different. Like I have this feeling, sometimes you do these long drives, and it's hard to, I don't know why I feel this, but I feel like something bad might happen. And then I start thinking, well, maybe I should pull over to add time or something. You know what I mean? To delay myself from
Yeah.
whatever this impending feeling. But then you think, well, What if you pulled over for half an hour and then left and got in an accident? And you think, well, what if I hadn't have done that? So maybe if something's supposed to happen, it's just supposed to happen. I don't know.
That, Bo, you also you do a pretty good drive every day. I mean, do you feel like when you're in the car, it's just day after day normality, or do you ever have anything weird happen in there?
Yeah, I don't really. I'm constantly surprised. This is I drive literally. I've been at Winfield Middle for 12, well, almost 12 years now, and I drive the same route every day. I'm surprised at all of the things that I still continue to notice along the way. You'd think that I've seen everything, but I keep an eye out for just details about things and stuff like that. But it is odd when you think about the way that your brain can go on autopilot, especially when you consider how inherently dangerous driving is. I mean, you're literally split seconds away from ending your life and someone else's life that's coming in the opposite direction for hours at a time. If you're on an hours long road trip, yet we all manage to continue to do this and maintain relative safety. It to me, that says more about the brain and its normal state than its paranormal state. I mean, we don't have to search for the paranormal to find wacky and wild examples of how the human brain works.
Yeah, very good. Along those lines, if you guys will indulge me, I wanted to touch on a little bit of feedback for our previous shows, just so we could kind of go over a few things. But I also want to mention a couple things that I'd seen in chat earlier that had been brought up. My buddy Uncle Larry, aka Leroy, had mentioned punching and kicking at shadow people. Shadow people is sometimes explained as maybe a mental disorder, or maybe even an optic issue. And of course, some people think that the shadow people are a legitimate paranormal event, or even dimensional. Have you guys ever experienced the phenomenon of shadow people?
Yeah, I think I have.
Really?
I've definitely seen shadows of what I believe are figures, but I think that this is sort of related to whatever the disease, or no, it's really not really a disease, or whatever the condition is, where you see faces in everyday objects.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's related to that, where you can see a shadow of something, and your brain will just slot it into that's probably a person category. Now, I've never had any physical interaction, like an altercation, like you were talking about with Larry, but I've definitely seen something out of the corner of my eye, and I was like, wow, that was definitely a person. Then I look again, and I don't see it again.
What about you, Flack?
Oh, yeah.
Really? Both of you? Okay.
Well, not like what you said, not where I see a person and then I look at that person, you know what I mean? Like, I don't see somebody walking up to me or whatever, but yeah, I frequently, will see like what looks like the, shape of a person or outline of a person. But again, I never got in a fight, with them per se.
Probably
but,
a good move.
I
would say.
I want to take my lunch money once, but
So, I wanted to, because we had some really nice feedback from the previous shows. I kind of want to get your all's opinion on this. When we did the vampire episode, first of the month, we had a bunch of people recommend movies that we didn't talk about, Flack. And one of the movies is a movie called Martin. George Romero's Martin was one. I don't know if anybody's seen that one. It is one that came up a couple times, because I had some people send me some private messages about that episode. Anybody seen that one?
No.
Another one.
No.
We also had it was also mentioned. Let's see here, Night of the Demon, and Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. So those are all mentioned that have vampires in them. And also, so we had another fellow send in the Hammer series, which I think we touched on briefly with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. So those are all good ones. Another one that was sent in was a BBC production. I'm trying to catch the name of it here. It's a BBC production of Nosferatu. I don't know if anybody seen that. It's a more recent. Oh no, it's Dracula. Excuse me. This was Sheila Dixon mentioned that.
Yeah, I went and I watched that.
Oh,
on her
really? How was it?
recommendation. Well, I'm a fan of the book because the book is not like what you think of when you think of Dracula, at least what I thought you think of. It was very, very similar to the book, which I've heard reading reviews that it's not common to find adaptations of the book it's not common to find Dracula movies that are that close to the book. I would recommend it. It fits right in with all of those great Granada Sherlock Holmes, and it's that era of the BBC. I thought it was great.
This is another one. Several people mentioned this one to me. It's called What We Do in the Shadows. I believe that's a TV show, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I hear it's good. So that one might be one to check out. In line with our Dark Side of Crime episode, Happy Coding sent us an audio or a video from someone named Screaming Lord Such, who apparently had a gimmick in the 60s where he would come on shows and sing this Jack the Ripper song he did live on the beat in Britain, and it was so scary that people would faint or run away. And there's actually a video of it, so if you want to look up, and some of our British fans or European fans may know about Screaming Lord Such, because apparently this gimmick he ran with forever. Either one of y'all heard of him?
No, I would love to hear that song.
Listen. It's super spooky. And the funny thing is, it looks like he's got, remember Paul Revere the Raiders? It's like they're his backing band. And then this guy comes out on stage, it's like, what is this? What is this guy doing? But yeah, I thought that was one worth mentioning here. We also had remember when we did the episode where we talked about the strange brews? I think it was last week. We talked about the toast brewing, where they just took old discarded toast and put it in the vat. Chris Foltz went to their brewery. He was there. He sent a picture over of the brewery, and he says he's drank it many times. Then he said it's all right, not the best. So there you go. If everyone wanted to give that one a whirl. Pajako chimed in once again about that vampire, or no, it was about our Dark Side of Crime episode. When we heard us talking about Spring Hill Jack, he didn't know much about him until that episode. He says he wonders if that's where they got the idea for Freddy Krueger. Interesting take on that. I believe that I've heard that part of the reason that Freddy Krueger came around was because of a newspaper article that people were having nightmares in this desert or something like that, and it were dying from. Does this mess with you, Flack?
Yeah, it was. I believe the article, what it had to do was, people that were just having nightmares that were so bad that they were refusing to go to sleep, and that someone had died basically from lack of sleep, from staying awake for so long, and so that was. He just began trying to come up with like what would be so terrible in a nightmare that would make you not want to go to sleep. So that was part of the lore behind Nightmare on Elm Street.
I will say Spring Hill Jack's gimmick with the claws or whatever, that's pretty scary. It's nightmare fuel.
After some of these shows, like I've tried to take some of the things we've talked about and implement them, because it is a Halloween season. So I did try to come up with some boots that would allow me to jump 9 feet high and possibly shoot flames, but that didn't go well. And so instead what I did was just put some moldy bread in water and serve that to my wife unbeknownstly. And
you should have scraped some of your DNA out of your chair, and then you can have Flackenhauser or whatever could be your brew.
DNA. I just put some Q-tip swabs and stuck it down in a Bud Light and had her drink it. So, and told her it was from Ronald Dow.
Pajako, he's quite the sleuth. Bo, you know this. When we mentioned BS or Not from Amazon Woman on the Moon was Jack the Ripper, in fact, the Loch Ness Monster. He mentioned that they mentioned in the short that these things happened on London's West End, but Whitechapel's on the East End. Then he said he saw the same thing in an episode of Babylon 5. So he's really paying attention this stuff. That always blows my mind. He also. Oh, go ahead, Boat.
I think it's a lot like how people from Chicago always point out like the night Chicago died by paper lace.
Yeah.
Where it starts out talking about the east side of Chicago, but there is no east side of Chicago because that's where the lake is.
Right. Yeah.
There's also that song is a myriad of stupidity in it if you listen to it. Pajako also asked about haunted dolls. I don't know how much we got into those a little bit. We were talking about TV shows, I believe, or TV movies. And he's even got, but what he's linked up here are some Etsy listings, as someone is selling real haunted dolls. They need loving. It says needs a loving. Real haunted dolls. What do we think about the haunted dolls, fellas?
Well, I'm just going to say that might be. We might need to shelve that idea and do a long, not now, but. I'd like to do maybe a longer episode about haunted things that get sold, because that was a big trend for a while.
Like I think that deserves its own episode for sure.
I like that idea. Yes. Good idea. It's a little bit of the old Curious Goods, aka Friday 13th series, selling cursed objects.
I think before we do that, we should both buy one and see how it goes.
Let me tell you something. When I went and saw that stupid Annabelle film, they got my money. That's as far as it goes. Dave just mentioned that in the chat. There's a 0% chance of that, Dave. So I want to take a quick break here. We're getting ready down to our last quarter here. When we come back, we're gonna maybe lighten the mood a little bit and talk about something I just discovered today, which is paranormal activity in the news. It's Halloween. And so this is where the paranormal gets to jumping. We're going to cover that and get the boys' thoughts on that in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. This is Conversations from the Darkside.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside.
All right. We are in the home stretch, the final segment of the final episode for 2024. Conversations for the Darkside. Hey, just before we get in this last segment, a quick thank you to everybody who has participated this year, whether you've left comments on our YouTube channel or have sent stuff in on Discord. We definitely appreciate all your input and people that showed up here in chat. We appreciate you. Hope you had a good time, and hope this has sort of bent you towards the proper Halloween spirit. And along those lines, I was nosing around. You're going to love this, Boat. I got tipped off on this one. Someone told me that, hey, did you know Newsweek, everybody knows about Newsweek, they've got a paranormal news section. It's updated regularly. I was like, holy smokes. I got to get into this. And so what I've got here in front of me, just a few of these news stories I thought we'd discuss before we get into a little more Halloween talk, is some paranormal news. Now, one would think that this season of the ghosts and the ghouls, that the stories would be more based on actual ghost stories stuff, but they've got some of the stupidest crap here. Just to lead the dance, this one hits a little close to home for me. I'm not gonna lie. Mom, grandma, so mom and grandma, blame ghosts after toddlers test positive for fentanyl. The ghost, this was ghost related, apparently. According to the site here, 2 women in Newton, North Carolina are facing criminal charge after being accused of causing a severe injury to 2 toddlers. Their defense is that the ghosts were involved. They said that a 1 and 2 year old suffered multiple injuries, including burns, bite marks, and broken bones. So these kids really got hosed. When questioned, the women reported that the injuries were the results of evil spirits within their apartment in about 40 miles north of Charlotte, North Carolina. Thankfully, the kids are going to be fine, but the people that look like they're believing this ghost tale. You know, if you think about it, this is horrible, by the way. Nobody wants their kids. Trust me, I've seen people exposed to fentanyl. Bad times, especially little kids. But what do you think about the possibility? I mean, if ghosts exist, do you think they would do anything that heinous? I mean, That's not a good stance for your court case, I don't
Well,
think.
okay, let's say you're an evil ghost.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, the better move, I mean, if you have ghostly powers, would be to sort of possess another person to do your bidding, because then nobody suspects that it's the ghost. It's the other person. You can get away with a lot more if you do your dastardly deeds through demonic possession rather than the demon itself making itself corporeal and then doing some weird junk.
Flack?
I'm just thinking like, we're just not alive on this earth for very long. I mean, in the big picture, right? And then we're gonna pass away. We're gonna die. Hopefully, there's some afterlife waiting for us, and I hope that my existence in that afterlife is not to return to Earth as a second-rate drug dealer.
Yeah.
I feel like that's bad karma. Like you've done something really wrong when St. Peter is like, well, let me check my list. I got bad news. You're going to be you got to go back and deal fentanyl to toddlers. Boy. Boy, that's a rough card to draw.
Yeah, no kidding. So here's an interesting one here. So the headline here, The Devil on Trial, Shock Reveal. Can sleeping pills really mimic possession? So this is a possession story. This was apparently there's a Netflix series called The Devil on Trial. Anybody seen this perchance? So in 1980, at the age of 11, David Glatzel was allegedly possessed by a demon, which was exorcised with the help of the famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. I bet you know who they are, don't you, Flack?
Oh yeah.
These guys are ham and eggers. You want to give a little background on these two?
Well, everywhere where there might be, I wouldn't say paranormal activity, but where there might be publicity related to it, they seem to show up.
Yeah, you ain't kidding. So, this guy's, believe it or not, this guy's possession has been adapted for the screen several times, including everyone's favorite, the 2021 movie, The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, I'm sure that was a real winner. But it turns out that this guy's, people are starting to believe that his mother used drugs to control the sons. And their father also used drugs to control the sons. So they were slipping the kids Sominex. And it would cause incredible mood swings. The kids would be tired. And so now people are wondering if what happened there was a combination of the toxicity of all that Sominex in their system caused them to act weird. Because, I mean, clearly they acted weird. So what do you think? The possibility that this possession was drug-related?
100%. 100% chance.
You like that one,
possessed kids were, yeah. I think I'd say somewhere between 95 and 98% of all quote-unquote possessions are neurological, apparent neurological disorders.
Okay, I'll buy that. What about you, Flack?
I mean, I just don't think the average teenager needs that much to act weird.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Most teenagers don't need drugs to act weird. That's very true.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you this, Bo, because this is a rare opportunity to have, I mean, I'm not going to say you're a holy man, but you're working on it. What is your opinion on possession, demonic possession, and the like? I mean, I know the church has a position, but where do you fall?
Well, I think that I fall in line broadly with what the church, and when I say the church, I mean the Catholic Church teaches, is that demonic possession does happen, but it's very, very, very rare. Whenever there is a case of demonic possession, like if somebody calls up a priest and says, "Hey, my sister is possessed," then the priest's first move will be like, "Okay, well, has your sister been to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist?" Because most of the time, the issues that people have are issues that are just within brain chemistry. There are cases like the case that the Exorcist film was based off of, which there have been cases of demonic possession that are real. But those cases are so rare that it sort of is almost like hitting the lottery in the worst possible way.
Interesting. Flack, you have a thought?
It's just one of those things, like a lot of stuff, I just don't know about. You know what I mean? I feel like I like Boat. I think Boat said 95 to 98%. I'd say I'd venture a guess and think that it's even higher than that. That most of them have some sort of worldly explanation, but there's always stuff that we just don't know about. So and woe to the person that finds out firsthand.
I would like to think that there is no demonic possession and it's all explainable, right?
Like it's just fentanyl from ghost drug dealers.
Well, I went to now
Are you going to talk about the psychic fair? Tell me you're going to talk about the psychic fair.
No, I didn't. To be honest with you, Boat, I hung out outside the psychic fair, and me and Luke played in the park, so I didn't go into the psychic fair. But I did go to a one of these ghost hunter convention deals in Lexington one time, and there was a guy there, maybe in Scarefest. There was a guy, and I've seen plenty of wacky experts. I'm using air quotes here. I mean, I wasn't buying it, but there was a guy that came there, and he was a incredibly educated man, and he's sort of famous. I wish I could remember his name, but he did a talk on the scientific and historical approach to demonology, possession. I mean, he was something, but he was also a demonologist. And I will say, he had enough cases there that would cause me to be concerned. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, and I didn't think this guy was a nut job. I mean, I thought he was an actual guy, and it was quite informative, and it did make me think. I'd like to think that stuff doesn't exist, but man, you never know. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and even if it's just a real deep psychological issue, and that a priest can maybe come in and maybe cure it just by the fact that he's a priest and knows what to say. I mean, that could be it. I mean, or it could be, who knows, devils and demons. You never know. When you get into that sort of spiritual area, everyone knows Exorcist is one of the all-time scariest films. There was a reason for it.
I will never watch that. I will never watch that in my whole life.
You're afraid to watch that one?
Yeah, I will never watch, because I've heard so many people who are like horror film diehard people, and they're like, yeah, that one's scary. I'm like, nope, no, thank you.
I'll be Flack's seen it many times. Would you recommend Boat watch that one, Flack?
I mean, yeah, with probably just show it in school.
Yeah,
I would say with the kids. There was a thing I probably mentioned this before, but I have this book. It's an older book. It was about like the history of horror films and stuff. And there's kind of like an addendum towards the end, and it says after the writing of this book, a new movie has come out, and it's so scary and so terrible and so offensive that it may never be topped in the world of film and cinema. And of course, it's talking about The Exorcist. And of course, like at the time, it was just like such a shocking film. It was so, brutal, and there's parts of it. I mean, it's a film that's definitely like made to make you feel uncomfortable. I mean, there's parts of it that are like I'm using this the true definition of ugly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the thing is that, like, for today's audiences, I mean, there's definitely parts that are shocking still. If the first time you see it, there's shock stuff in there, but I just don't know how bad it is compared to half the movies that are out there now, the horror movies. I mean, it seems like every year there's some new gross out. I mean, like movies like when I first saw Saw and those type of movies, and I watched the first Hostel. I didn't even get all the way through the first Hostel movie. I just thought this isn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's
torture porn.
you know,
I don't watch
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah, it's just not for me. You know, my horror was the fun, not necessarily comedy horror, but fun like Friday the 13th movies. I mean, it's not a comedy. It's a guy, guy that kills people, but it was entertaining in its own way, and those type of movies just aren't entertaining, So that I think The Exorcist definitely is a fork in horror cinema, right? But I don't know. I just don't know how bad it is compared to some of the new stuff that's out there.
Yeah, I don't want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so much of a weenie that like I feel like there's a cutoff in cinema for me. Like even watching that the BBC Dracula, like there's like some blood stuff in there, and I'm just like, man, I already don't like this very much. So I think that my line in the sand is several hundred yards behind most people's.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I would like to see a movie if you start another stream, a movie review show with Boat and the guy in his attic.
they probably do have diverse
like the
tastes.
Siskel and Ebert of Boat's house.
This is here. Get this. This is local news, as fresh as today's headlines. This is from Monday, October 14th of this year. Paranormal activity at the Putnam Aging Center. So, I picked this out for a reason. This made the local TV. There's a van they used at the Putnam Aging Center that they used to transport stuff, and the staff arrived one morning to find that the van's doors were wide open. Flack, you should take note of this. This could happen to you. And so nothing was stolen. No evidence was found. They just thought some thieves or something had gotten into it. So they went back to look at the footage on the security camera, and they were alarmed to find out that at 1:19 a.m. the doors just opened by themselves. There was no explanation ever found. For why the doors did that, they just jiggled a little bit and they just opened. It's what's interesting to me about this is I actually have worked in the Putnam Aging Center. The Putnam Aging Center sits down near the river, and it's very, very close. In fact, I think the monument's in like their backyard. It's very close to where the Battle of Scary Creek was. It's funny, we talked about that like last week briefly, Flack. The Battle of Scary Creek was a battle here in Putnam County where the Confederates held off some Union troops at the battle. It's sort of well known around here just because it's sort of like our battle. But there is some speculation that the van door opening was somehow connected to this battlefield. So believe it or not, at one time, me and the Chud formed a computer establishment, CW Computers, and we were going to, what was it? Maybe it was AW, whatever. Oh, DW, excuse me. And we were going. That's a heck of a name for a computer place. That instills confidence. DW. And so we were installing new computers. This is the first and only gig we ever had was the aging program. And so we were in there after they closed, and we told them all, hey, we're going to get all your computers installed while you're gone. It'd be a piece of cake. This would have been circa 90, 89 or 90. And it didn't go that good, believe it or not. It was horrible. And right about halfway through the night, I looked over and the Joe was asleep on the floor in mid-computer installation. So I had to pick up the slack. But I will say that building is a creepy building for whatever reason. I don't know what was in there before the aging program. And you could hear the river outside or you could hear water. I assume that's what it is. So I wasn't terribly surprised to hear this. But I thought that was kind of neat that something like that would be so close to home. Have you ever been down to the aging program building Boat or over to the monument?
I've driven. I mean, you drive by there all the time.
Yeah.
Whenever you take the St. Albans exit and turn left, they're giving away all kinds of canes and wheelchairs these days.
Good.
And they're hiring drivers. That's what I know about it.
That's good to know. They're hiring drivers too, eh? Okay, that's not too bad. In case I need a gig. Go ahead, Boat.
Rob, talking about vans, have you ever thought about the angle of, driving the van out to a seminary? To a seminary, not a seminary.
Yeah, what an
I
angle.
guess that could be scary in a different way. Do a cemetery or some sort of haunted location and do a stealth camp there.
I mean, I've thought about it. The problem with it is, like my van looks like a worker type van, which is good for certain places like urban kind of camping and stuff. But when you're in a cemetery in a big van with no windows, just looks like you're up to no good. It's just
Perhaps you need a stealth hearse.
That would be. I would do that. Now, Aaron's story, I clipped something out for you. For the show. This is just a brief, like one paragraph story, but this is from CBS News. And I thought you guys might find this interesting. It says, this is from 2 years ago, 2022. It says, there has been an increase in the number of reports of possible hauntings at homes amid the pandemic lockdown. Believers say they have no way to keep themselves socially distant from the spirit world and claim they have been subjected to an extra dose of paranormal activity during the coronavirus quarantine. Paranormal investigators believe some are likely the real deal, but others have simpler explanations. Quote, people are spending more time in their home, and everything from wood drying out, you're getting popping sounds because they're getting into the warmer months and so on and so forth. So basically some people wrote this off as saying that, because people were spending more time in their homes, like what Boat said about, having a house settle or things, that people were just hearing more of those types of sounds. Now, it says since the lockdowns around the U.S. began in March, this website, which is the Atlantic Paranormal Society, has had a jump in reports of hauntings. And while there may be no scientific evidence that ghosts exist, a survey by YouGov says 45% of adults in the United States say that they do believe in ghosts.
So the pandemic, it's funny, that pandemic and the lockdown is going to have repercussions that we'll never fully understand. I think it's already had tons, but I think I'm not terribly surprised at the content of that article, because they're not wrong. People are spending more time at home. They didn't have a choice, but there was that uneasy feeling that you always had. It reminded me of the Cold War. That's what it reminded me of. That's what the pandemic reminded me. That same kind of feeling where we're all screwed. This is it. This could be the big one. And so when you combine being a shut-in and being sort of subconsciously nervous, I could see where you would start feeling uneasy in your own home. Boat, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first night of the lockdown. I mean, we were never locked down, but the first night when they were like, all right, nobody needs to go out anywhere, I thought, I was scared that we were going to have some sort of purge-like situation where armed, gangs would take to the streets of Hurricane. I was seriously freaked out by that because, that's something like that had never happened before. So those kind of situations put you in a mindset where you're willing to believe things that aren't necessarily rational.
Yeah.
There's the old joke about, the two hunters seeing a bear. And the one guy puts on his running shoes, and the other hunter says, "There's no way you can outrun a bear." And he says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you."
Yeah.
And it was the same kind of thing, like during the pandemic, and what you were talking about, Boat, is that's what I worry about, is not roving gangs of people that decide they're going to take over stuff. I worry about my neighbor. Like, if we run out of food, he doesn't have to go rob, some grocery store. He just has to come over and kill me. Right. So that's what I was worried about, just the closer type threat.
I would hate to have been in a bigger city during that. That's one thing we had going for us here, is that there's plenty of room. So it's not like you can't go walk out of your, like some places where you're in apartments or, you know, you live downtown. I mean, it's a big deal, you know, for us. Could we walk out in the backyard? Yes. Like even Boat came over. Remember that we shot an House of the Amigos out in the backyard during that thing, you know, and so it wasn't the worst, but you're right. That was, you talk about true horror. That event was, because you never needed, like Boat said, you didn't know how the public was going to act. Most of them behaved themselves, you know, but, and then you also didn't know where the virus was going to stop. So, you know, let's hope we don't have to worry about that anytime in the future, but that's the last thing we need. Flack, boy, I sure do appreciate you sitting in and doing this with me all these past 4 weeks. Why don't you tell the people if they want more Flack in their lives, where can they get it?
Hey, you know, the easiest thing to do is go to robohara.com/links. And that has links to my podcast. It has links to, you know, things like Twitter and Instagram and my website and all that stuff. So it's all kind of all in one place like that. So I'm kind of all over the place, but that's one good centralized thing. And I believe there's a link on that also to Big Rob's Van, but also bigrobsvan.com/links has all links to all the van stuff, the YouTube and the Instagram and all that kind of stuff.
If you haven't checked out, or you're new to Flack, which I don't know how that's possible, but for God's sakes, to get in the Halloween spirit, he does a podcast called You Don't Know Flack. It's been running forever, and he's got some great Halloween stuff in there, and and everything in there is gold, amongst his other treasure trove of podcasts. So please check him out. He does great stuff. Plus, check out his YouTube channel as well. Now, I want to give a hearty thanks to the Boat for popping in on a couple of these. It's always great to have you in, Boater. And why don't you tell the people if they need more Boat in their life? Where can they get more Boat action?
Probably the Amigos Everything Amiga podcast.
I heard of that. I heard that's awesome.
Yeah. Every Friday. Except when it's on Wednesday or Thursday, but it's usually weekly.
Yeah.
And you can find it right here where we are on Twitch right now, or at youtube.com/Amigos Retro Gaming, or on the podcast player of your choice.
Very good, very good. Just Google us, brother. You'll see us. Well, fellas, I think it's time that I reluctantly call this sucker to a close. We've had 4 big episodes. If you missed any of the previous episodes, I think you might get a charge out of them. And of course, this is probably, I think, episode 13 or 14 of this show. And these shows are evergreen. So if you want to go back for some scary stories or some talks about dreams, UFOs, we've done pretty much a ton of different topics. You can go search through the archives. There are plenty of them there. And we appreciate everybody for checking us out. All your nice comments, we appreciate. And I hope everybody has a happy and healthy Halloween. I would steer clear of the cemetery if you can help it. And we will catch you guys next October for another round of Conversations from the Dark Side. Good night, everybody.
You have just experienced Conversations from the Dark Side. Until next week, try to enjoy the daylight.